Live in Ohio, it's time to get your fix. The Sports Fix.
Yes, indeed, as the man with the radio voice just said. Welcome live from Ohio. It is Monday, September 29th. We're on the air rolling. Man, I can't believe we're at the end of this month already. We're at the end of the season. Seasons change, all kinds of things here. We're rocking and rolling live on the Sports Fix, and I am so happy that you have joined me once again. Thank you so much, guys. We've got a long week. Busy week as always, and a busy Monday here today. Although, going to switch things up a little bit. John McMullen, usually with us here, talking about the entire slate of the NFL, with the Browns having a bye week and us being able to maneuver a little bit here. He's going to join us on Wednesday so that we can open up the first hour. Been neglecting some phone calls the last couple of editions of the show last week, so short week with Cavs Media Day. Woo, Cavs Media Day. Let me tell you, the circus has indeed returned to Cleveland. We're going to talk about that here on the show, but we're going to be able to open up the phones, take some of your phone calls at the end. Man, I don't know what to do. The first, I was putting the lineup together for the show, and then I was looking at how we were going to end the show and look ahead to tomorrow, all the normal stuff that we do, and I'm like, man, this is the first time in 6 months that I haven't written after the final note of the show. Preview tomorrow's Indians game, set the stage. There is no more stage to set. We'll talk about that though. But I'll tell you, there's a lot good and bad we'll talk about. I'm definitely optimistic, more than just optimistic about next year. And of course the sting, the disappointment coming out of the weekend, you're going to feel it today. But I'm telling you, Jason Giambi, some people may have mocked what he said the other day or chuckled and said, yeah, well, we'll see, we'll believe it when we see it. But I believe he is not far off at all when he said this is a 100-win Indians team next year. Now, how they get there, that's some things to talk about. We got a whole lot of winter real estate ahead here to talk about that. We'll start breaking it down today. Look at the weekend that is for the Indians as they finished up the slate this weekend. We'll look at the Major League Baseball playoffs coming up. We'll talk some baseball. We'll talk some, of course, NFL slate of games going on. Cavaliers coming up on the slate today. Buckeyes, big win as they head into Big Ten play here. Game pretty much played out kind of the way I thought it would. Stayed relatively competitive for the first half of the game or so, and then pretty much all Buckeyes after that. Dan Wismar from the Cleveland Fan, he's going to be with us here. We'll talk some Tribe and some Buckeyes with Dan Wismar. Looking forward to our Monday conversation as we'll break down the big victory over the Cincinnati Bearcats for the Ohio State Buckeyes. As I said, Indian season ends. We're going to dive into that. Cavs and so much more. Derek Jeter wraps up a career. It's beginnings and endings and middles and monsters starting and Cavs are going, and here we go. Let's start with the Sports Fix, baby. Welcoming you guys across the Sports Fix radio network, however that is that you tune in. Perhaps you're listening to us live, speaking of tuning in, on TuneIn and TuneIn's radio app worldwide on the TuneIn.com website. Great place to listen. Crystal clear HD audio every day that we're on the air, which, by the way, is Monday through Friday, live at noon. Perhaps you're listening to us on Spreaker.com, Spreaker's mobile apps as well, Mixler.com and their mobile apps. Welcome into those of you listening live on those platforms as well. Everybody who streams us directly off of our home base, the mothership, as I like to call it, the sportsfix.net. Welcome in all of you listening to us live. And, of course, welcome into the thousands listening around the world, all across different time zones on digital delay. Perhaps you're listening on the world's largest internet radio provider, iHeartRadio. Maybe you're streaming us on iTunes. You download us and subscribe there. Perhaps on Stitcher and Stitcher and SoundCloud and CarPlay and, of course, Mixler as well. All those live formats have delay podcast formats as well. Whether you listen on a podcast, a download, a subscription, or live, however you do it, welcoming you guys once again, and thank you so much for doing it. And I say it every day. You know it. You know what's coming. Flipping the microphone around and I'm sending it in your direction instead of this way, because they give it to me, I give it back to you. You guys are an interactive, integral part of the Sports Fix, so use your voice and be heard, especially today. Phone lines are open for hour number one, 216-539 7535 is the number to call and the way to do that. So pick up your phone and do it with us. 216-539-7535, the number to call. If you can't get to the phones, hit us up on our social media. Facebook.com/The Sports Fix, or just search for The Sports Fix on Facebook and make sure you like the page while you're there. Become a fan of us. And Twitter, if that's your thing, it's our thing too. Tweet with us at The Sports Fix CLE, at The Sports Fix CLE. You can email us, thesportsfix@AOL.com, always to stay in touch with the show 24/7. Again, Facebook.com/The Sports Fix. Tweet with us at The Sports Fix CLE. Email us, thesportsfix@AOL.com, and let's do the Sports Fix thing together. I see the phones ringing already. I'm going to get to putting some calls in the queue here momentarily. Quickly, though, looking at things, setting the stage, I'm going to talk about the Tribe. Of course, I said beginnings and middles and endings, and the end of an Indian season, the first day here now where you don't have baseball to look ahead to, and 85 victories for the Indians. I'm going to get into that here momentarily. But like I said, a lot of good to come out of that, to come out of this season. But man, hexing as well. The way, matter of fact, you know what? I'm gonna put that off until the next segment. I've got a break coming up here. We're gonna talk Tribe, and I want you to get on the phones and do it with me. 216-539-7535. Also, hey, the NFL, full slate of action here. John McMullen's not with us, but before we go to the break, real quickly, I wanted to mention that, and then we're gonna dive into some Tribe conversation here, you guys, as the Browns were off this weekend. A couple of their compatriots in the AFC North got into action here this weekend. Up and down results there. I don't know if you guys checked out some football. I tell you what, it was funny too, because I did glance. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I bounced back and forth with the football games. I watched the Indians game. This is the final Indians game of the season. I watched that. But, you know, my son, I kept coming in the room, and he had it on the Ravens and the Panthers and on the Bucks and the Steelers. And I'm like, look, man, it's not even just like the rivalry thing. I've got no interest in sitting here and watching Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh. It's just, not only is it Pittsburgh's game, but it's just not really a very, I mean, it actually turned out down the stretch to be an interesting game, but it was a yawner there for a minute, and I really wasn't digging. I'm sorry, Steve Smith in the rivalry and all that didn't really do it for me with the Ravens and the Panthers. But I said, look, man, you want to get to the Eagles game? Let's watch that game. We'll watch the 4:00 game. I've got no problem with that. But I was just really not digging the 1:00 slate of games there. Ravens, big victory there, following up their win over the Browns the previous week, 38-10. They just rolled the Panthers, which, hey, couple of things you could take out of that, just looking at the game, you know, and watching how it played out. I mean, Baltimore really dominant in that one. They were up 21-7 at halftime and never looked back. But you can look at the spread on that one and say, hey, man, the Browns played a really good game against a team that appears to be stronger, I think, maybe than they looked against the Browns, which could speak well for the Browns. Also, seeing the Panthers and the way they've been rolled with the Steelers and the Ravens here, that bodes well for the Browns having the Panthers down the stretch of the season, because early on, I think some things that have surprised me that I've noticed about them. And then pretty much the same storyline for the other game going on, except the result was the opposite. It looked like the Steelers, I thought really there was a moment there where it looked like the Steelers were getting ready to pull away in this game. They seemed to be getting things going for themselves, but Mike Glennon brings back the Buccaneers. They score 10 unanswered in the fourth quarter. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Late fourth quarter, giving up some points, much like they did against the Browns there, as we saw in the opening week of the season. And the Steelers get beat. They drop to 2-2. Bucks get their first win of the season. But I watched the way the Steelers, especially the way they were mixing and matching. They had the run going. I know Bell got banged up there, but Bell and Blunt had some back-to-back series where they had some good running game going, and some play action was working well off of that. And I saw the blueprint. I said, if the Browns play the Bucks like this, man, there's your blueprint for beating them as well, besides the fact their problems back there in pass coverage as well. So some good things could be taken from both of those games from the Browns fans' perspective, because obviously Steelers, Ravens, that's divisional games, but there's two of your opponents coming up, and man, I really was pretty confident the Browns should be able to handle Tampa. I didn't need to see that game yesterday for that. But looking at the Carolina game, I said, man, there's the game plan there. to beat those guys as well. So anyways, there are a couple of good games there. Looked around the slate, the afternoon games as well. Philly and San Francisco, that was a good one. San Francisco, just when you start to get the shovel out, and some people are quickly writing those guys off. And you just look at how a week changes. A week, we see it here in Cleveland because it flows up and down. But look at how a week changes things. Look at Atlanta. They just have historic offensive performance against Tampa. And then the Twins, we know all the problems going on with them. And then they got the rookie coming in, Teddy Bridgewater, and all of that. And you're thinking, man, no Adrian Peterson. Can it get worse for Minnesota? And then they flip the script and roll the Falcons 41-28. So you just never know from week to week. It seems like you do know about Jacksonville, by the way, because they just continue to look like the dregs of the NFL there. Also, speaking of Browns, if you're looking for something good, Indy 41, Tennessee 17. And if you're a Browns player, you should have an extra chip on your shoulder coming in to the game this weekend. And the only reason I'm saying that is because you're going to Tennessee. And now this is why it's because it's a road game. I do understand why the odds makers have made Tennessee a 1-point favorite over the Browns, because they are the home team, and that's usually worth 3 points in the way they do the line there. But man, Tennessee has been outscored by like 100 points in the last 3 games. They're coming in on a very bad run and coming in off of getting just rolled there. Andrew Luck went to town. Glad somebody's got him on their fantasy football team. But Andrew Luck going to work there, and that's a good sign if you're the Browns coming out of that. And hey, maybe you need that little extra motivation, that little extra chip on your shoulder. There it is. This team has gotten plowed the last couple of weeks, and they're still coming in the 1-point favorite over us. So let's go to Tennessee and show them what they can do with that line and where they can put it. But a lot of good games here. Of course, Monday night games still to come. You got the Patriots and the Chiefs here tonight. Last night, hey, how about Dallas? Man, you write them off early on, and then again, it just goes to show you, too, that the NFL schedule's a beast week to week, and it really does change. And, I was talking to somebody off the air the other day, and we were talking about how you look at the schedule, and he was looking at it and talking about what teams did last year. And I'm like, you really can't look at a schedule like that, I mean, especially in the NFL where things change so much from season to season. But two, the NFL, and it's this way with all sports, there's just certain teams, whether a game comes in 14-2 versus 2-14, if that 2-14 team happens to have the big wide receivers that tower over the 14-2 team's small cornerbacks, and they're able to exploit that one matchup that they've got, they come out of there with the victory. I mean, really, it's such a week-to-week animal in the NFL, and that's where, too, changing the coat of paint with the Browns, I think, is so important, because you get caught up in that same old week-to-week thing, when really in the NFL, it's not that way more than any other league. In baseball, I get it. You get stuck in that no man's land. In basketball for year after year. In football, it really is a sign of incompetence in the front office when you're unable to do that, instead of struggling for simply a few years and then turning it around, because the NFL is the ultimate turnaround league. But anyway, so there's some stuff to look at here. A fun slate of games. You saw the Lions continuing to roll 24-17. Nice game there. They won over the Jets, and talked about some of the games from the teams in the division. Miami, Ryan Tannehill, way to answer back. I think he had 14 completions in a row there a few days after his coach refused to commit to him as a coach. I'm telling you, these coaches, I think you look at what happened with Brian Hoyer and getting motivated and then firing it up. You look at Tannehill, that's going to become playbook 101. The next page for how you deal with your quarterback is it's part of the strategy now, is to diss them in the media or make them feel slighted in the least little way, so that they come out there with that little extra chip on your shoulder, any way you can dig up that artificial motivation. And speaking, hey, Giants too, there was another one. That's what I mean, difference from week to week. A couple of weeks ago, the Giants were looking like a very discombobulated offensive team, but we've seen them get off the horse a bit there and get that thing going. It's a big victory for them over Washington. It's Thursday night. And speaking of Kirk Cousins, man, I should have traded him while his value was at its peak, because his value is no longer at its peak. He talk about the pumpkin or the coach turning back into a pumpkin. It may have done that the other day for Kirk Cousins. What a 1 week swing. Goes from throwing for 800 yards and 17 touchdown passes 1 week